All right, hello and welcome to what should effectively be the March episode of Plays Well with Others. I will not comment if this is not in March, and if you're listening to this later than March, you should have got here when it launched, which is definitely in March. And big news, this episode of Plays Well with Others is brought to you by Firewall Coffee. We have a sponsor. They're sponsoring us in coffee. It's good coffee. The Bit. For IT pros who need a refreshing jolt to keep things running smoothly, this roast is your ticket to a bright start. Scan the QR code here and go to firewall.coffee to get yours today. It's my first sponsor read. This is a big day. Auspicious
Very
occasion.
exciting.
I'm excited.
It's for coffee, which makes it very exciting because let's just be honest, this whole experience of being in technology is fueled by coffee.
And bourbon.
And sometimes both.
At the same time, it is March.
So we're not in dry January anymore. Is that your point?
Yeah, what's that?
I don't know.
Yes, as a good Irish American, it's no such thing. And in fact, this cup that you bought me millions of years ago,
I'd buy that
hold
cup
my
for
beer.
you. That is his favorite phrase, Andrew's favorite phrase, when somebody says, "Hey, I can't get this to work, something's not happening." Then Andrew will go, "All right, hold my beer." But what he actually does is he holds his keyboard.
Usually it's duck and cover these days. God, here we go. So we keep trying to stay out of current events because the thinking is that somebody's going to listen to this in 6 months and the current events won't be current anymore. But I do kind of enjoy the idea that maybe this goes wildly differently than how we predicted, or somebody listens to us on a recording that they find in a dystopian future run by robots. So we are the last surviving
And the
members.
the topic's interesting regardless of the time. I do feel like this one is one that's going to be relevant for quite some time.
Should we keep burying the lead or should we talk about it?
Fine, we'll talk about it.
So the topic today is AI, data ethics, and Skynet, because I'm never going to not use a Skynet reference. So two things happened. I think it's this week. Two things happened really in the month of March, we'll say loosely, just 2025. One, the acquisition of Redfin, call it online real estate brokerage, by Rocket Mortgage, or the Rocket family of companies. Which piece of trivia, Rocket Mortgage is a powerhouse of an IMB, and I pulled the MMI data before I jumped on here because I was curious, and they did something like $65 billion in origination volume in the last 14 months, which, it's all right. It's pocket change. But why is this interesting? Why do we care, other than the fact that it's just $1.75 billion in pocket change for Rocket? The interesting part is that with the acquisition of Redfin comes 14 petabytes of data on potential borrowers or home purchasers. So if you're not like me and a dork, you may not know what 14 petabytes of data looks like, but
I don't. Just to be clear.
Good.
It's like I can't conceptualize $1 trillion. I can't conceptualize it.
That's another interesting exercise of, how many dollars is a pallet of money? American cash
it's more than you think, but I don't know.
American cash does not pack up well. It's very heavy and it's very big, but I digress. That probably won't be yours or my problem anytime in the near future of what to do with all of my pallets of money.
If I had a nickel for every time I said that.
Well, and I'm sure you will be just as disappointed as I was. Robinhood also announced this week that they were going to maximize their deposits to $250,000.
It's a tragedy.
I can't manage my strategies.
What am I going to do?
I don't know. So anyway, 14 petabytes of data. So let's do some math here. So Andrew Moore, my name, is 11 characters long. That's about 11 bytes of data. How many times will my name go into 14 petabytes? 1.7 quadrillion times, which is also kind of an unimaginable number. So,
yeah. As I was going to say, I also don't conceptualize that very well.
It's a freaking big number.
But suffice it to say, it's a lot.
It's about 500,000 times the data volume of everyone's name in the United States. So you could take everyone's name, put it on a flash drive that fit just everyone's name, and have 500,000 of them. That I started by typing out some notes and said reasonable extrapolation was that this data set represents. I was going to actually do some math on how many data points they have on everybody in the country, but where I stopped was, holy smokes, that's a lot of data.
We just didn't want anyone to get too depressed before we got into the meat and potatoes of this.
I don't know if it's a bad thing, which is consequentially
That's the question.
The meat and potatoes of this episode.
Right.
So what is happening is they've admitted this out loud. So you can read their press release, and I'll make a note to actually include that, because I think every episode this year I have said I'm going to include something in the show notes, and then I don't. So
this time's going to be the game changer.
It's going to be different this time.
Yeah.
I swear.
Stick around to find out.
Right. Check
now
the
we
show
come
notes
with coffee, so you can trust us.
This episode brought to you by Firewall Coffee. Sponsor me, Coca-Cola. So all of this, by their admission, is going into AI and machine learning. And what they said was they specifically want to create a highly customized experience for individuals that are looking to purchase or refinance a home. Seems fair to me, right?
There are positives.
Oh, there are absolutely positives. You don't think too hard about it, I think. But if you dig into what kinds of data that the Rocket family of companies controls, the lion's share is obviously Rocket Mortgage, so they have the same mortgage data that every other lender has, which, I'm familiar with that. That's fairly straightforward. It's like creditworthiness, it's where do you live, where are you looking to live, what's your employment, what's your income, stuff that you would need to qualify for a loan.
Qualify for a loan, yeah.
Where it gets interesting is you may, if you've been anywhere near an online ad platform in the last 5 years, you've heard about Rocket Money. Minimize your subscriptions with Rocket Money. Your all-in-one budgeting application. So now we've taken mortgage data and we've expanded on your financial data. So not only do we have your, 6 months of bank statements, but now we have all of your transactions. And then
you start to feel like where does private information and the public information need to have some sort of a line in the sand?
Yeah. And again, we're still looking for a downside, right? So if I'm looking to buy a home and I'm a Rocket customer, maybe that's fine, But let's now talk about Redfin. Redfin, if you've been around on the internet, you've probably seen it. Zillow obviously is the obvious term that everybody's familiar with of online brokerages, but Redfin some years ago, it might have been as long as 7-8 years ago, kind of upset the apple cart of the NAR and realtors by saying, we're going to not only form our own brokerage, but we're going to operate outside of the NAR, the National Association of Realtors, which they may be singing a vastly different tune these days after the NAR settlement of this, or last year rather. But now with this acquisition that's theoretically going to close in Q3 of this year, you have all of this home purchase data and shopping data. So, let's keep tally at home. You have data on individuals' creditworthiness. You have information on their financial transactions, their external investments. So like 401ks, IRAs, credit cards, the whole shebang. How much do you owe on your vehicles? How much do you owe on your home that isn't mortgaged through Rocket? And now we know about your shopping habits. So where would you like to live? Where and when are you thinking of listing your current home? And all kinds of other things. 14 petabytes of data is a lot of data, and I don't know what that includes.
And I feel like there's two reactions to this, right? So reaction number one is you're Ron Swanson, unplug the computer, throw it in the trash, start looking for ways to redact your information from public documents. Like there's one avenue, right? And then the other one is probably more average American of like, okay, well, all the stuff's already out there. What do I care? Like, what are they going to do with it that's going to hurt me? What are they going to do with it that's going to hurt me?
I mean, I have trust issues with my barber.
But I'm genuinely saying, I think it's like when I don't know, you start taking I'm trying to think of something that you can get desensitized to that's not like inappropriate. And for some reason, I'm
Well,
thinking about things I shouldn't talk about on here. But you get desensitized to things, right? Exposure to violence in the media is an example. You've seen, John Wick, all of a sudden, you're really desensitized to violence because you've been thrown into deep waters. And I feel like we're very desensitized to the sharing of information, the sharing of our personal data. And to be fair, that's just the tip of the iceberg of what might be considered a con list to why is this a bad thing, right? Is sharing data.
agreed. And I think a lot of this goes back to individual education. So it's really only been maybe a year, maybe 18 months since data protection has been a topic of conversation for the average American. And that's stemmed from ads on you see on YouTube or ads on the internet from Aura or Hello Privacy or any number of the dark web protection agencies. We'll find your information on the dark web and get rid of it so that the evil data brokers don't have it.
But see, I disagree. I don't think it's the first time that this conversation's come up. I think the conversation has been there for a long time, but it's a shifting and a modernizing of the language. I mean, you had people talking about, warning about the dangers of sacrificing individual freedom in the name of progress. I mean, that's been a conversation since, I don't know, when was the revolution in Russia and change to communism? Is that the furthest back we can trace this, or is it further? I don't even know. But my point is that this conversation of sacrificing small individual things that seem inconsequential in an effort to make progress and, provide the country or something some larger benefit, and that being exploited for totalitarianism or some other, gain of the wealthy, that's been a conversation for a very long time.
But yeah, if you genericize the topic like that and start talking about it in terms of any small concession in favor of some convenience, then yeah, that I think you could argue that's human nature and has happened since the dawn of time.
But it's interesting because of how well these things play into each other, right? Because it's not just, is it the same conversation? It is the same conversation because the way that some of this data is being used to feed into these open AI kind of tools are driving to monopolies. They're driving to, potentially having a lack of competition. And that by nature of humans is going to drive to some corruption potentially. I mean, not potentially already, not potentially, but it's the same. Human experience is the same through time, right? It's just we find new and better and more creative ways to exploit each other. It's fascinating.
I know, it's great. Speaking of exploitation, that might have been the best segue to our second bullet point. I fully believe that every person that listens to this is going to have a different opinion. Don't at me, or do actually. Your hate comments help.
Go right ahead.
Yeah, your hate comments help as much as your love comments. Let's have it. But our friend Mr. Sam Altman, the once and future king of OpenAI, has been running this campaign of late. I think maybe a max of 2 weeks ago, and the whole bit is, I fully think he is exploiting the fear of China to boost his company's profitability and his company's viability long term.
There's nothing that inspires people like the fear of something else.
Huh? And if you're not familiar, and don't be ashamed if you're not, but OpenAI is the company that backs the large language models that support ChatGPT and any number of other online large language model AI chatbot type functions or type apps. His quote was, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, I cut some stuff out of the middle, but he says in short, if American companies are left without fair use access, which, remember, fair use,
Unfettered access, right?
well, that's my next bullet, which is my further editorialization of the sentence. But he
I
says,
liked it though. It was good.
But he says if American companies are left without fair use access, which remember, fair use is what we call things like Wikipedia. So it's summarized information that could be based on copywritten data, could be based on reserved information, but because it's summarized and it's not first party, we can consider it fair use and we don't have to pay attributions. We don't have to make attributions and we don't have to pay royalties. So if American companies are left without fair use access, here's the scary part, and put some lightning behind me. The race for AI is effectively over. And he's speaking about the People's Republic of China with their new models that are coming out. I'm not going to remember the new ones that came out like yesterday, but
Might have some
DeepSeek,
unscrupulous processes in the
they
making.
all do. But my paraphrasing, if we don't allow unfettered access to copywritten materials, then the US loses to China.
And if we do allow unfettered access, we undermine the value of intellectual property. We revoke the right to a content creator's material. Uh, there's a huge ethical conversation that happens around fair compensation and the exploitation of other people's work.
It's not
My dad
been.
and I were just talking about this. He's an artist. He literally sells his art. That is his job. That's what he does. And I was like talking to him about posting a website online, another avenue where people can find his art and interact with it and purchase it. And he's like, yeah, actually, I can't do that because AI can then see my artwork and can potentially replicate. I lose out on the uniqueness of what I provide. And it's really interesting because he's right. Like that is a possibility. If something gets posted on Google Images, that's to potentially fair game for AI to, take that and reproduce something similar.
I think where I draw the line, and to be very clear, I am very pro AI.
And I feel like I'm coming off as very anti AI, but I want to get to that in a minute because I think there's things we can do. It's just all about that middle ground, right? Unfettered access, being completely unscrupulous in our ethics as we approach AI. That's where the problem is. I'm in the healthcare industry right now, and it's all about managing your AI and looking at generative AI in a safe and secure manner. And there's things you can do. There's a path forward for us to continue progress without without compromising our ethics, I guess I'll say, or compromising ourselves.
Where I take issue, to be clear, I don't think I care about generative AI replicating the style of a digital artist or
I
an
do.
artist that's obviously you do. You got
I
skin
can.
in the game.
Yeah.
But
But even more
it's
than
the
that,
same.
right?
Well, it's the exact same issue that we have today on any number of things that become available on the internet. Immediately, you have knockoffs,
Mm-mm.
whether it be people that take screenshots of artists' work and then drop ship replicate them on your coffee cups and t-shirts and
Designer brands, and then all of a sudden, knockoffs on you know, websites that come from different places that I'm not going to name,
huh?
but that you could maybe get something for a very inexpensive replica.
Right. And that's why the issue that I take is less about reproduction and more about unsafe exposure. And that's what you're talking about in healthcare. If we allow AI models and LLMs to train on everything it can find, you run the risk of wholesale exposing data that is better not exposed in a convenient way. If you've been in the cybersecurity space, then you're familiar with open source intelligence. And this is the concept that I can find out about people based on their social media posts, based on the accounts that they create, their activity online. Everybody leaves a footprint.
Mhm.
This is what leads to people being doxxed, where, some keyboard warrior disagrees with somebody on the internet and they expose all of their personal data, like their home address, and creeps start taking pictures of them and harassing people. It's terrible. But it's doable, but it takes some expertise. It takes some skills. If we have models that are training on some public data sources that may or may not be considered ethical, and we have a scenario where suddenly I'm able to, through prompt engineering, find out where Jess lives, that's problematic.
So that was that's the first item on the con list, right? That's the data exposure that we're all now a part of. And you're right, it takes something that was already in existence and it amplifies it. So that comes back to the question of what is ethical data sourcing and how can we potentially wrap some structure around what data can be used to train an AI model to ensure that it is the data that we want it to be trained on
Right.
and not that unfettered access that you were talking about before. Um, but I mean, even that is a conversation like what's approved data? Is it just stuff that you put on the internet yourself that's
Oh,
allowed?
see, I think we've answered this question. We've answered it already. I can't go find somebody's unique artwork that is copyright material and then use it to back my commercial website or use it on a booklet for my commercial website. So why is AI any different? Why should I allow another commercial entity to capitalize and profit on information, whether it be data or, well, everything's data, but whether it be written text information or music or
Yeah.
imagery, any of that? We've already answered the question.
Right, but that's not a current control. And that is a control that should be in place. At least it's not an enforceable control in
Well,
any
yeah.
sort of measure. And that goes to the second thing that we need to do to help be ethical as we move forward with our progress. And that's ensuring that we have disclosure of how a model is trained. That's not something that anybody's going to share their secret sauce right now. It's their model, it's their algorithm, but there has to be some layer of transparency there, some sort of data source list or reference that you share out so that you're accountable to what you're using.
Yeah, it's the problem is that the approach isn't scalable. And because I can go as someone who is intimately familiar with training machine learning models, it's not exactly the same as like these deep learning models, but it's really dang similar. You can get information on what training data was used, whether you have it available or in the case of like unsupervised learning techniques, you can get it. You can get the model to tell you what are my features, but it's not readily consumable by a normal person.
It's not, but I mean, this is a source of some lawsuits recently, right? Where the results ended up being something that wasn't accurate because where the data was coming from was not the reliable source. So, I mean, it plays two parts, right? Like, A, we want to make sure it's ethically sourced data, but B, you want to make sure it's the right freaking source.
Right. Well, that's where Sam Altman's bit has come into play because there have been companies that have been fairly successful in copyright law cases because their works were unethically reproduced. So that if you're sitting on if you're sitting on the business side of it and you're using Chat GPT, especially for like copywriting and things like that, you have to be very careful that you're not just getting somebody else's copyrighted information, copywritten.
Copywritten.
Yeah. Copywritten information and IP, and you're reproducing it. And the defense isn't I use Chat GPT to get it.
Well, no, yeah, that can't be it. But here's something tying off of that. How do you go about creating like a framework so that creators or like the original person who came up with the thing is fairly compensated for whatever is utilized? And that I think is the most, for me at least, that feels like the most challenging system. Like, how do you establish a royalty system or a licensing system for these data sets that exist that people are consuming for their AI models? Because you mentioned it before. You can't just take somebody's work and put it on your website as your background, and that's now your work. You can't do that. That you have to pay the creator. You can't just play a Beatles song on your commercial. You have to pay a licensing fee for that or a royalties fee for that. And I imagine that's probably quite hefty. Maybe you go a different direction. I'm just saying. But how do you introduce something like that into this AI model? Because for all intents and purposes, it's nothing different. We already have rules and regulations in other industries. How do those get translated?
I think maybe it's foolish to solve this problem in public because this feels like one of those like billion-dollar ideas, but it it's almost a watershed moment in much the same way that the music industry was 20 years ago. I had kind of a formative conversation with a music producer, a music executive back in what year is it? Like be like early 2000s, where his perspective was if somebody can solve meaningful digital rights management and do it in a way that is transparent, then that they're a billion-dollar idea.
Yeah, that's
And
it. In a
the
safe and unbiased way. And that's the hard part right now is there's a lot of bias in the conversation.
right, well, look at how we solved that problem. Because for those of you that remember, rewind all the way back, there in the olden days, you used to have to buy music in a physical media.
Yeah.
And to convert that music into digital media was considered verboten. But we did it anyway, and then we reproduced it. So that's one side of it. We were violating the DRM contract. It's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But the way that was solved was we pivoted to iTunes. And so you had to buy the track, and that track got locked to your account, and there's always ways to get around it.
No. That's not what I was going to say.
Okay.
I was going to say it was solved by pivoting to iTunes, but it was also solved by very public rating of people who were like overusing Napster and very like public. I remember this conversation. I was in college when all of this was happening, and we had tons of illegal music. I mean, not me. I would never do that.
Of course not.
But a lot of people that I knew,
those rapscallions,
whose names will remain unspoken, had a lot of illegal music on their computers. And then you start hearing about like people actually getting arrested for it or actually getting prosecuted for it. And that helped change the conversation for the regular Joe, like, my friend that I was talking about before that was doing that stuff. They didn't want to get in trouble.
Did it though?
It did for me. Not that I would do that.
Your friend. Well, so I think that wasn't the solution. That was an approach on the way to the solution.
It wasn't the solution. It wasn't a solution, but it was what helped change people to using the solution that was out there.
No. So we're going to go another step. Building to the solution, dadgummit. So what ultimately happened is that all of this media became streaming media. It became Spotify. It became Rhapsody. Was that one? I think Rhapsody might have been one of the first streaming topics. Napster, sort of gray area.
There was Pandora.
Yeah, Pandora. But
yeah.
What happened effectively is that we lowered the barrier of entry for media to a subscription model, and then the rest of the world went downhill from there. But seriously, the artists, the idea is that you get paid on streams just like you would get paid on someone purchasing the track. But it opened up this window for these streaming middle layers to take a little bit off the top and progressively take more and more off the top. So are we saying, I think I might be saying, but are we saying that the solution to exposing copyright data for training of models is almost like a middleman marketplace for
subscription?
People to subscribe? And is OpenAI going to pay for that?
Here's my content. Yeah, but I mean, here's my content. I'm subscribing it here. I'm licensing it to me. So now if you want to use it, if your model wants to consume my data, that's fine. But you owe me this much money. I love it. But here's the thing, though, and I'm going to go back to what I said before that you disagreed with. But at the end of the day, accountability has to be a part of that. Government accountability has to be a part of it. Napster was taken down forcefully. That didn't go away because people are like, there's subscriptions now, I'm going to use that. There has to be that accountability in the marketplace as well. And that doesn't exist. I mean, it can't exist because there's no model for it, but it has to exist simultaneously.
Well, so actually...
Do you need to like shove your glasses up your face and like
I don't
hold
have
up your
any
finger while you say that?
I don't have any. But there actually are licenses on GitHub available now that replicate all of the common open source licenses like MIT, BSD, GNU, but they're non-AI variants. So there seems to be some tentative
They
first
might be
steps
going that
to
direction. That's great.
at least providing a license structure. Now, a license is only as good as the enforcement of it. So, there's
Exactly.
that.
So I was right.
You'll never hear me admit it. So look, we gotta turn the plane to like long final here. The one thing that I wanted to make sure that I
A
say,
question though.
I know, and you'll get okay, fine, have at it. All right,
How
let's
do
do
we
it.
make this international? Like, how does that international collaboration come to play? Is
You
it the
don't right
same?
now. It's
But that
being
has to
couched.
happen for it to be it all long term.
Is that ever possible though? Not even in just AI, like in other items. Like where do the knockoffs come from? Don't say it because we'll get smitten.
I don't even know what you're talking about. All
Well, we yeah, oh
right,
yeah, I
say the
gotcha.
thing you needed to say.
Well, so I'm considering it's not been long ago. So we quoted my friend Mr. Altman that we're racing against China. This is a space race. Everything is terrible, and if we don't win, then the world's going to come to an end. It's not been long. It's been not even 6 months since we had that TikTok ban discussion. And the whole impetus for that ban was China's going to get our data. That is effectively the same lever that he is pulling. Now, I will tell you one thing on a public internet forum and another thing over a beer, but effectively, the people that are making these rulings don't understand the impacts of the rulings. They don't understand how the systems work, and they don't understand how that's going to affect us long term.
Or they do.
Yeah.
And I'm going to use a quote by George Orwell here.
Yes.
Power is not a means, it is an end. One does not establish a dictatorship in order to safeguard a revolution. One makes a revolution in order to establish a dictatorship. Basically saying that the facade that those in power use to consolidate and perpetuate their control is generally on purpose.
And I'm going to make a sub or a footnote on that was definitely a wide sweeping political comment, not a specific one.
And it's not a specific one. I genuinely didn't mean it as a specific one. My
I know.
point was that
That's why I gave you
that
the footnote.
we have to be very cognizant of what these releases of little freedoms do in the long term. And fortunately we live in a country where we can have a voice on that, and we can speak openly about, wanting to preserve the rights of, and the security and the privacy of individual people.
Can we start another podcast called Demosthenes and Locke?
That is just a beautiful moment right there. I love it. That is one of my favorite books. Just the
I
one
was
book, not the
really
whole series.
hoping.
I want to be very clear.
God, yes.
For those of you who don't know what we're talking about, it's Ender's Game, and it's well worth the read, 100%. But you can stop after that one.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, if you recommend The Lost Boys to a mother of young children, you probably are going to get yourself kicked.
I'm not saying it wasn't a good book. I'm not saying it wasn't well written. I just also really wish I didn't know that book existed.
And I'm also not
There
saying
were
that I didn't
tears.
get kicked. The core, and I think the landing of this conversation is data is money. Always has been, always will be. And AI gives us a means to pivot from moving data with a shovel to moving data with a bulldozer. And
I like the idea of every person getting 25 cents every 3 weeks because an AI model has consumed their data.
that might be my least favorite thing I've ever heard.
I think it's adorable.
The fees on the ACH is going to be more than what you get. I need a Ron Swanson.
Andrew, sorry, guys.
God. No, because exactly what that would turn into is all of these little piddly class actions that I get to be a part of because I used Google App Store a million years ago, and I get 3 checks, all postmarked for 36 cents for 12
Saying they're
cents.
all for like 12 cents. Yeah.
Is please, for the love of God, as we continue to adopt AI and as you continue to build solutions, looking at you, audience, let pragmatism take over. There's going to be a temptation to make money on everything and call everything .ai. But I swear, please do not make an AI coffee maker. Hello, future Andrew here. We got caught up in that last episode and all the excitement. We didn't record the outro. So, this is me reminding you, if you've enjoyed this episode, we definitely appreciate having you here. And make sure to go ahead and like and subscribe if you're over there on YouTube, or if you're listening to us on any of your podcast platforms, anywhere you get podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio. Drop us a line, let us know you're listening, and share with your friends. Also, a brief reminder that this episode was brought to you by Firewall.coffee. Go ahead and check them out and let us know what you think. And as always, thanks for listening.